Just as pressing for us is our digestion of the recently released new Amazon Films, just razor sharp bit of political satire, Irresistible, starring Steve Carell and Rose Byrne, and directed by Jon Stewart.
And written by. This is a total passion project.
This is a Jon Stewart
the sunset,
joint.
and this is what he's been thinking of.
And you know what?
This is where he's been.
Probably the most beloved comedian in America when he departed. Like, towards the end of Jon Stewart's reign, that was like the peon that conservatives would give liberals. They'd be like, well, there's one liberal, like Jon Stewart. He skewers both sides because he was just so beloved. Everyone loved him.
Yeah.
Everyone thought he was the best. And in his time, he was the best. But comedy comedy's very ephemeral.
This movie is a really brutal cautionary tale about the half-life of political satire.
I lost it, man. I just kept thinking of that scene from Bottle Rocket when the old Indian guy tries to do the crack the safe and he just can't do it. And he's like, I lost it, man. I lost it. And Owen Wilson goes, did you ever have it to begin with?
Forget it. Just forget it, man. You can't do it because you never knew how in the first place.
And I mean, I will say Stewart in the moment was able to channel the moment in a way that was decently useful, but he lost it, man.
And, we'll go through the movie in a way that preserves its wonderful surprises for you, the listener, sort of recreate the experience of watching it for you. But, I guess, just the main takeaway I have before we start talking about the actual movie is that the only way this film makes sense is if this is just a screenplay Jon Stewart had written on the weekends in the height of the Daily Show, and that's been sitting in a chest for the last 10 years, and then Amazon was just like, oh well, yeah, we'll just make a movie, put it out, because it's just the world it portrays and the targets of its skewerings is just seem like a totally different galaxy from the political world that we live in now. It's a movie that is so oddly not in tune with the times that it's supposed to take place in.
It's uncanny. Watching old comedy is, even if it's not funny, often instructive because it shows, oh, this is what people thought back then. These were the dominant things that you would miss, just reading at the history, because a lot of the cultural ephemera kind of dissolves. But it's incredibly disorienting watching something that was made now that feels like an amber-trapped period piece. An Andertrap period comedy from a different era. That's wild.
It is. It's in that sense, I really enjoyed watching it. In that sense, seeing the exact culture of 2006 at a high frame rate in 1080p in modern fashion and modern actors and the modern Steve Carell, not Michael Scott Steve Carell, but the sort of bearded Steve Carell. The 50-year-old Steve Carell, the 24-year-old women want to choke them.
Yeah, the guy who Post Office became the go-to actor for sort of happy, sad, middle-aged guy comedies, Day in Real Life and Crazy
Steve
Sexy
Carell,
Love or whatever.
Steve Carell, ever since The Office, has been angling to be an Alexander Payne protagonist.
Yes.
That's clearly what he wants to be. He wants to be in a movie where his wife dies and his daughter hates him.
It's funny you bring up Alexander Payne because, Election would be the counterexample to this, which is a movie basically about the 2000 election, but holds up in every possible respect, and has only gotten sharper, really, in retrospect.
Alexander Payne's the master. He's the king. You listen to the show and you're like, who do you guys like besides John Carpenter or The Sopranos or Scorsese? Alexander Payne. A lot of people, The Descendants... Not even a political... The Descendants is just a great movie about a depressed man. I love that movie. Alexander Payne fucking rocks. He gets our seal of approval. 100%.
He is because he is observant. He is a Greek guy from the middle of the country, which means he has that sort of Coen Brothers slight remove, and he uses it to full effect to analyze the Goyish pigs all around him, and he makes good art out of it. I realize now that the feeling of watching this movie would be the equivalent of watching a movie that came out this year starring Timothy Chalamet that was in every other respect a greasy lensed, horny sex comedy from the 80s the kind where every scene would be canceled.
Yeah. Timothée Chalamet and Saoirse Ronan starring in Porky's 5 or something like that.
Yeah,
like
Timothée
that
Chalamet
out of touch with the moment.
Yeah, Timothée Chalamet in a movie where like everything now is correctly categorized as date rape.
Yeah,
and blackface. There's just blackface in literally every scene for no reason.
Saoirse Ronan does the Harvard blackface movie. It's the sequel to that where she's a woman doing
Soul
it.
Man.
Soul Woman, starring Saoirse Ronan, and
that would be the equivalent to this film.
This movie reminded me of something that technically does not exist, that maybe some of you know of. A year and a half ago, me and Andrew from E1 created a fictional movie in our head canon called Push Pull, where Bradley Cooper plays a Democratic advisor to a presidential candidate, and Alexander Daddario is an RNC operative. And I'm going to give you guys some sample lines of dialogue.
Please, spit.
Daddario. So, do you always tear up after sex? Cooper, looking at his phone. We did it. Referring to some weird law sending black kids to go to a private school. Daddario. Oh my God. Hey, this is really good. Cooper, smiling, fighting the tears. Yeah, they caress each other. Cooper. We've won unwinnable elections, gave people affordable health care, and changed the goddamn country. Why can't I raise a daughter? Obama stand-in. Well, if we figured that one out, I'd be on my 3rd term. But I think you're doing just fine, John.
Okay. If Jon Stewart, if we are correct, and this screenplay was written when Jon Stewart was still doing The Daily Show, that is his only defense against you being sued by you and Andrew Hudson from E1 for directly copying the plot of Push Pull.
This is Push Pull.
Because this movie is about a Republican and a Democratic strategist who have a prior relationship, who sort of spar and jostle with one another over the election of a small town Wisconsin mayor's race. So why don't we? Why don't we just go into the movie? Let's dive in. So it begins in a pre-credit sequence with like you hear like in voiceover Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump from the 2016 debate, right? So like you hear little clips of that, and then you see like in the spin room the two main characters, Gary Zimmer played by Steve Carell, and ice cold Republican bitch, aka Ann Coulter, aka played by Rose Byrne. I mean, that was like the first thing that was like dramatically out of place in this movie for me, was Rose Byrne's character as the sort of like icy, sexually voracious blonde who's like, you know, offensive and calls guys pussies. Like, it seemed like she was a stand-in for that Ann Coulter archetype that was like the avatar of like a Republican, like evil, bitchy, ruthless Republican. Like sort of like,
or like
otherwise known as Felix's dream woman.
Yeah.
There's no comment whether you know. If a waspish woman about heights 5'7" to 5'11", of 80% Anglo or Saxon extraction, who was sexually cruel and a very icy personality, whether or not I would put a dairy farm in her uterus, she behaved as Rose Byrne does in this movie.
But you know what I mean, though? Like, it's so clear her character is a stand-in for. And
she's Coulter, like Laura Ingraham. All these women are like 85 now.
Yeah. And it's just like, if this movie were genuinely written about 2020 or about this current moment, like that character would be like some daffy, like internet lunatic, like Laura Loomer or fucking Cassandra Fairbanks. It would just be like, it would be just like some pure like internet grifter hustler who's just not even good at her job, or like, you know, is anything like reaches the level of like a respectable political operative. Like all those people, all those archetypes of the Bush years are gone. Like they're
I mean, they might still hang around Washington, but they're just collecting paychecks. They're not driving any of this shit. They're not making us all dance on their puppet strings. We're way beyond any that level of control of the narrative.
Yeah, and guys who have been like wiping the mustard off Donald Trump's hot dogs have more power than these people. All they like that happens to them is Qataris pay them $3 million a year to access their Rolodexes. That's it. They don't really have any influence anymore.
Yeah.
And like the other than that, like the first clue that I think that I perceived that this movie was written in 2007 is that, like, you know, it cuts back and forth between Carell and Rose Byrne in the spin room post debate, and it starts out with they're both flacking for their candidate, Clinton or Trump, and Carell is just like, oh, he's lying to the American people, and then Rose Byrne's just like, actually, he's not lying to the American people, and then their dialogue goes into a kind of like a fake sort of like a dream reality where they're speaking the things that they're thinking, and what they're saying is, hey, I'm lying to you. I'm here talking to you because I'm the best at lying, and that, like, you're coming to me for the lies that I tell you. And I remember that was literally a joke that Jon Stewart did on The Daily Show like 15 years ago, where it was just like, they call it the spin room. The journalists go to the room where they're telling you that they're lying to you and then reporting on the spin that they're, pitching you. So like that was a classic Daily Show bit. And this was just, made manifest in this screenplay, in this film. So, of course, like we all know how the 2016 election turned out. It goes from there to sort of like a pan through Steve Carell, who's the hotshot Democratic strategist who just blew the 2016 election. As the camera pans through his house, and like there's a shot of it where it's just like there's a photograph of him and Bill Clinton, and then he has books on his bookshelf written by both Bill Clinton and Alan Dershowitz. And I was wondering, this is where my brain began to wonder, like, how self-aware of itself the movie is. And it's a question that's still open in my mind. Like, I haven't fully resolved in my head, like, just what the point of view of Jon Stewart and the people who made this movie is about its main character and people like him. And Carell, he's in bed, and like there's like a liquor bottle on the floor, and you could tell that he's just like like wasted, strung out, and like defeated and humiliated by
because there's a goddamn Cheeto in the White House.
There is a Cheeto in the White House, and he assured everyone that there was no way that Cheeto would win. Michigan,
it's not even
Wisconsin,
a human being. It's a giant snack treat. How could it become president? It's absurd to even suggest. What?
If you told me dude, if you told me in 2015 that a tangerine tyrant would be in the White House, what the F? What the actual F?
So like, yeah, and then it cuts to like, a credit sequence that, edits together footage of, people on the campaign trail throughout American history. And then like the plot sort of gets going where it's, Steve Carell is, back at work at the DNC adrenochrome farm, and he's looking for a way for Democrats to get back what they've lost and appeal to rural Americans. And like, once again, it's this very red state, blue state divide that really just heavily relies on like a paradigm of like a much earlier era of like the George W. Bush years, where it's just like, I guess red and blue states are still a phenomenon, but like this movie really becomes a duel of like a duel of cultural signifiers between like big city types and like, rough-hewn red state middle America.
And in reality, the terrain of conflict for presidential politics in the last decade plus has been suburbs. Not mythical rural small towns. The suburbs. That's it. That's where all of the shifting and all of the vote splitting is happening, and that's where all the focus is on. It's not in the fent hollers where nobody even lives anymore.
Yeah, here's what's really crazy about rural communities? They actually have a significantly lower population density than suburbs or urban centers.
Yeah.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah. Making it a weird place to focus all of your political attention on. Considering you're getting less for your dollar.
Which is not to say that, like, who gives a shit about rural communities? They're like very underserved by both.
That's
both
why,
obviously, because no one lives there.
Yeah,
but like this was a very popular thing, both in 2004 and after 2016. The idea that Trump was brought in by like in Mark Sanford's words, a whirlwind of votes from rural communities, and not just that like he won the suburbs and urban, like a lot of urban centers just didn't vote,
right? Yeah,
in a lot of key places because they were so discouraged by their choices,
or weren't able to, even if they wanted to,
right?
Yeah.
No, yeah,
but the thing is, it's not about the rural area shit. It's not about the raw votes. It's about, as you said, the signifying, and the rural signifiers are fetishized. And the thing is that Stewart is aware of that, and we'll get to that. But you still have to watch the movie where they're doing this, which is not fun.
And it's just like all the jokes, all the comedic beats are like a good chunk of them are based on this like. Hey, I'm a guy that wears a Patagonia fleece vest and drinks soy lattes, and then like, oh, but you're a guy who wears like the sort of like the snap button shirts and drives a pickup truck.
Yeah.
It's that kind of dichotomy where they're mining a lot of the jokes in this movie. That just again, it just seems like a previous decade.
Even if you are admitting that kind of conceit is stupid, it's like if you still wrote approximately 300 jokes about that dichotomy, yeah, it still sucks.
Yes, exactly.
It's still really bad.
It's dog shit. So the plot of the movie gets started when Steve Carell is putting in work at the adrenochrome factory, and one of his underlings brings to his attention a viral video from a small town in Wisconsin where we see the sort of set up to it where it's Chris Cooper plays a former Marine colonel who's now a farmer in like a small Wisconsin town called Deerlocken, and he's got the rough hands, drives a pickup truck, listens to Glenn Campbell, and like the opening scene is him driving to a meeting at the town hall where they're debating a bill that would require like a driver's license or state ID to get government benefits in the community. And he shows up at a public forum and takes a stand for supporting everyone in the community, including like there's a funny scene where he's talking about undocumented immigrants, and then he's just like I think our town is built by everyone. Even you, Diego and Manuel, and he's just like pointing out people who are undocumented. It seems a bit iffy, like you wouldn't. Hey, just keep that on the low, buddy. We're just trying to get by here. Just don't want to get ice called in on us.
For a Marine colonel, his OPSEC is dog shit.
And he's like, because I'm a Marine, that I know that the weakest link in the chain is you're only as strong as blah blah blah. And hey, would you ask for Jesus's ID? Shit like that. And
yeah, like very very Fugelsanian.
Yeah,
if you were an old head,
exactly. It's the classic liberal democratic fetish for finding someone who can be like, oh, it's because I believe in Jesus that I believe in I don't know, the earned income tax credit or some shit like that.
Do you guys remember these videos from the 2016 election? The liberal hillbilly.
No.
Oh, they were really bad. They were really bad. It was just like a guy in West Virginia being like, just doing shit like that.
Oh,
Jesus Christ,
God.
was an immigrant. Yeah.
So
very bad.
So Carell sees this this viral video of like the kind of grizzled Marine Corps colonel standing up for what are essentially Democratic Party values, and he thinks to himself like, aha, like this is our ticket back, and if I can like just get this guy to run for mayor, we'll create sort of an media event, and the Democratic Party will sort of bone up on our rural bona fides, and get a little juice, a little traction there. So he travels to Wisconsin, and there's a scene with him driving into town where while Chris Cooper was driving to the town hall, he's listening to Glenn Campbell. And Steve Carell's driving into town, and like he's on the radio, it's the same Glenn Campbell song. And then there's a scene where he changes the radio station from that to Terry Gross and NPR. And then it's just like you hear the NPR music, and then it's just like this is NPR. You're listening to all things gay.
Yeah, this is homo pussy hour. Later, we'll give crying instructions.
So he pulls into town and goes to the local watering hole. And in the beginning of a baffling long shot joke, he walks in and he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna relate to these small town guys." He's like, "I'll take a burger and a bud. Boy, that sounds good. I love a domestic macro lager and a delicious hammed burger. Yeah, give it to me." And the guys at the bar are kind of like look at him like, "What the fuck?" And then but then lo and behold, they bring him a Budweiser and a burger, and he makes small talk with the townies, one of whom is played by Will Sasso, in a totally underutilized performance. I mean, if Sasso's in the movie, I'd like to see more of Sasso.
Has Jon Stewart not seen Drop Dead Gorgeous?
Yeah,
perfect.
Honestly,
fantastic tour de force comedic performance by Sasso in that movie.
If you actually wanted to make a comprehensively funny movie, have Will Sasso in the Steve Carell role.
Yeah,
now we're talking.
No, Will Sasso is a comedic genius. He's one of the greatest, and one of the only actors who made good vines. His vines were really
they were funny.
Sasso vines are so fucking
with
funny.
The lemon
He's
and shit.
So
fantastic.
He was an absolute king. One of the still.
And he could
greatest.
bring the correct, because the thing about like this, we'll get to it, but this movie is poking fun at Steve Carell. He is a subject of humor. His pretensions are to be undermined. His assumptions are to be interrogated by Jon Stewart. But he fundamentally, there is a sense of identification with that character, when in fact that character, for this movie to be meaningful at all, should be fatter, stupider, more contemptuous in every way. And I think Sasso could have brought that out.
So yeah, he's at the bar, and then there's a bit where he doesn't realize that Budweiser bottles have twist-off caps, and he asks for a bottle opener. He's like, my hands are too Jewish to open this beer.
Yeah. If only I didn't have my foreskin taken off. Do you have any beer for pedophiles?
And then so he gets a room. He rents a room above the local the bar, the
Hofbrau house,
the Hofbrau Palace. And then immediately there's the beginning of one of many jokes throughout the movie about how he asked for the Wi-Fi password, and they're like, "What's that?" Or they don't have Wi-Fi, and this is This was a real swing and a miss here, because everywhere in America has Wi-Fi now.
How do you think people in these communities get on Facebook and accuse each other of not raising each other's kids?
Yeah.
I mean, there are deserts for internet connectivity in the boonies of the big square states, but it's very hard to find a city the size of which the mayoral election would even be contested that would not have Wi-Fi at the major stops.
Yeah, and now another interesting thread to this movie is that it takes place in Wisconsin, and Matt is a native son, and Catherine, who watched the movie as well, is also from Wisconsin. So I would just like to get your take on how this film did it accurately capture the Wisconsin character or personalities.
One, no one was fat enough.
Correct.
Two, no one had the accent. And three, there was not enough obvious drunk driving.
No, if I made this movie, it would be about the Democrats adding drunk driving licenses to their plank. And it would be like a feel-good story. It would be like a Moneyball movie about how drunk driving is good.
You guys are joking, but Wisconsin had to have their federal highway money threatened to be taken away from them to move their drunk driving number from 0.1 to 0.08.
No, yeah. That was the tyrant Reagan.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Most of the people who are part of my foreign fighters contingent in the Alberta independence movie are former Wisconsinites, hoping to find another drunk driving sanctuary. In Calgary, you can drive free.
Here's another thing that we made note of that you confirmed does not accurately capture Wisconsin. So, the next morning, when he wakes up and he goes out to meet with Chris Cooper's Marine character and pitch him on running for mayor of this town. He stops out at the local bakery first, and they're like, "Oh, well, if you're going to see the colonel, please take him his pastries. He can be grumpy in the morning without a little snack or whatever." And Carell just sort of awkwardly and nervously plays off this his comfort with talking to normal regular Americans. But then there's a scene where he's in the car and he tries some of a little crumb cake or a little local.
It was
pastry.
streusel.
It's streusel, and then he just sits in his car and just blows ropes straight into his Dockers from eating a gluten-based pastry for the first time in probably 20 years.
Yeah, I've only been eating Soylent. I have no idea what flavor is.
This tastes even better than a smooth boy.
And Matt, you pointed out, the film really tries to play up this idea that hey, outside of big city America, the local cuisine is actually quite delectable or just really rich and authentic.
Because it's using real flavors. It's no, it's the same fucking processed, fried, pressed corn slurry as everywhere else. Especially with the Northern Tier. The only culinary innovation of the Northern Tier of states is put cheese in it. That's it.
So he rides out to the farm of the Marine, and he's just sort of hey, I saw your viral video and it really spoke to me, and I'd like to bend your ear for a tick about something. And then of course Chris Cooper hilariously gets him to participate in a day's worth of chores maintaining his farm, and then he finally pitches him on it. But first Chris Cooper's hot young daughter is revealed as well. And like she becomes a main character as well. But Carell first sees her like elbow deep in a cow's asshole, like artificially inseminating it, and he was just like, "What? A beautiful woman fisting a cow? What? Ugh. Like, is that real? Does this happen?" He's like, "I've only ever seen that at parties."
That's only in the basement of the Brookings Institute.
Yeah. So he's like, he finally sits down with Chris Cooper, and he's like, "Look, I want you to run for mayor of this town. I know you may not think of yourself as a Democrat, but if what you said in that video is how you really feel, then I assure you, you are a Democrat." And like, standing up for the little guy, appealing to our better angels, and like sort of working hard to like protect the least among us. It's like that's our values, and like I'd really like you to do this for us. And I'm not going to bullshit you. We're losing elections. We're getting our ass kicked right now because guys like me don't know how to fuck daughters like yours. So teach me, how do I get in your daughter's pants? And then Chris Cooper is just like, "Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll do it, but on one condition. You get me to that island I read so much about."
I was like, that was the thing that would have been a hilarious setup for the movie, that he looked so good on paper and he has all these democratic values and he's actually a compelling public speaker, but they actually meet him and he's like, the age of consent is very restrictive. The French intellectuals were right.
He goes, I know what all you high-level Democrats do. I've been on the internet and read about your sick rituals with children and women of the evening, and I want in. What does it take to get involved? That looks like a lot of fun.
We wanted what happened. You've heard this story, right? Where the Japanese during World War II were given the protocols of the Elders of Zion by the Germans, and they read it and were like, "These guys are awesome."
We need some of them here.
No, yeah, it was like it would have been a funnier movie if they go all in on this Chris Cooper guy, and then as soon as he starts talking and they're like pot committed, he's just like, I want to direct your attention to this map of synagogues in the greater Wisconsin area.
Look, we have to get Jews out of the Department of Energy. He's just speaking like that while like the orchestral music swells.
So he gets Chris Cooper's character on board, but like the actual caveat that Chris Cooper pitches to him, he's like, "Look, I'll do this, I'll run for mayor, but only if you personally like move here for the months it'll take to do it and directly run my campaign. Like you can't just fob it off onto one of your guys. Like you need to be in this with me, like as partners, get your hands dirty, run my campaign for real. Like, and if you do that, I'm your guy." So, Carell, he agrees to it. And this is like another sort of like, again, of an earlier era, like the sense that this movie gave me is that it just seemed to be a comedic depiction of the Democrats' strategy in the 2006 midterm election. Like the Rahm Emanuel Blue Dog strategy, where they're like, oh, how do we defeat Bush and the Republicans in the war on terror? And they're like, just find some like guy who's voted Republican his entire life and has been a troop and is willing to just change sides and run for us one time.
Yeah,
and we saw how that story ended.
A lot of those guys got elected. You want to guess how many terms most of them served?
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 max. Those guys got fucking annihilated by the most mentally ill jet ski dealers in America in 2010. They got fucking owned.
Yeah, as soon as the Tea Party wave came in, those guys were fucking like flies
Toast.
at the end of summer. Like, yeah. And, or if you want a more contemporary example, like this is like, this is the Amy McGrath strategy they're like, oh, she was a fighter pilot. Oh, well, that's good enough. So Carell and the Marine Colonel, they're going to do it. They're going to challenge the Republican mayor and get some media juice going about how the Democrats are the friend of the little guy. And there's a scene where, Carell, he sort of checks out the competition and goes to a place that they call in the movie the Ambassador's Lounge, which is really just a garage with a bunch of dudes sitting around a table where it's like the mayor and his friends, which is just sort of like a very low rent version of Carcosa. It's just like the jet ski dealership guy, local entrepreneurs, athletes, and Catholic priests who are just kind of like hanging out together.
If anyone's seen the Red Riding trilogy, that guy, like the Sean Bean guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Just hang around at the social club, allocate all the tax money, run the local police, and do ritual sex crimes.
No, yeah, it's just like, this is in small town America, we don't need temples and Moloch and all that bullshit. We don't need islands. We have our friend's garage, and then we have like a very smooth rural Chalamet types sit on our ass.
So
we have the shortstop on the town softball team fart in a bag, and we all huff
it. Yeah. So okay. So like the DC hotshot is going to sort of like bootstrap this campaign with local volunteers and show them the way that a 21st century well-oiled campaign machine is going to run. They're going to bring in data and analytics, and they're going to raise money, and they're going to give this guy a go for it. They're going to give him a run for his money. They're going to make a race out of it. But lo and behold, they start getting a little media buzz, which, by the way, in the movie is portrayed with a screenshot from the Daily Kos, and it's just just fucking, once again, just real finger on the pulse of the nation.
Yeah, if you put a candidate like this on the Daily Kos now, he would raise approximately $382 from active readers, and the rest would be like, "Are you my grandson? Why are you on my iPad? Is this FaceTime?"
Yeah, that's another thing. It's like whatever kind of, whatever, because he is setting up a fake out here, but things like that are not part of it. Like, he actually has, as part of his narrative, is something that's supposed to be plausible. Well, this guy went viral, and then he got on Daily Kos, and the donations just came in. And it's like, that is all 2006 shit. That none of that is really. First of all, like the whole movie is premised on the notion that this guy's video has like a news cycle of like relevance of more than 24 hours.
Yeah.
Like Joe the Plumber. Like if Joe the Plumber existed now, like he had an epic moment with a candidate where he owns him in one way or the other, he would have to kill his entire family to get more than an afternoon as a story. But this has this guy being like a multi news cycle, a viral favorite who then sets the netroots on fire.
The netroots. The netroots. Even that phrase is just, it lands like a fucking turd. Like, just plop right there in the bowl. Just, oh man, a 10-year-old turd.
Anyone who goes viral today, it's like, there's 20 minutes where people are making the shittiest memes you've ever seen.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, the guy looking at the butterfly, and he's like, is this epic bus stop, man?
I was just
and also, you don't get there.
Yeah.
You don't get there by telling off the mayor about immigrants. You get there by showing up at the town hall without pants on or something.
Yeah, and then like some woman who's worked for New York Mag for 83 years is like, I want epic bus stop man to fuck me. And then the Daily Beast writes an article where they're like, epic bus stop man used the ethnic term Siamese on Reddit in 2015. And then people are like, I'm done standing epic bus stop man. And then epic bus stop man is like, I have learned a lot in these past 3 hours. And then Vinny Beetle puts him on a tour, and that's the cycle.
Oh God,
that is the perfect cycle of memification for our current moment. God damn.
This movie needed Vinny Beetle to show up in like a fucking stolen Ford Taurus. Or like, yo, Dan, you want to box the Bagel Boss on a decommissioned riverboat used for gambling? Yeah. We're going to stream it on my website.
Jon Stewart, you're a millionaire. Help us pitch the movie Epic Bus Stop Man.
So Steve, through Daily Kos and the netroots, the Marine Colonel begins to get some media hits and a little bit of juice. But for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. The Republicans see this and they're like, "Aha, we're not going to let this go uncontested." And they send in their hotshot campaign fixer, the Ice Queen, played by Rose Byrne, and she shows up in town to run the Republican mayor's campaign. And of course, it's revealed that her and Steve Carell have a prior romantic relationship or hook up with one another. And she shows up and like immediately she's just like, "Hi, Gary, how's your pussy, you homo?" And then he's just like, "Oh, okay. I see you're out at your old ways again." And she's just like this sexually alpha, like a Republican ice queen who licks his face to say goodbye to him at one point.
Yeah, alpha posture.
That was kind of hot.
Yeah, Felix is very, very torqued.
Am I the only guy who thinks that's hot? Like, sort of.
I
like,
can
it
see
depends
that.
on who does it.
It's not my favorite
Like,
thing.
if like a hot woman did it, okay.
Or just treats you like shit, or just is just kind of contemptuous, but like, yeah, as you said, sort of sexually cruel.
Yeah, that's every
man.
every Jewish man's dream.
So yeah, she's just like, So she begins needling him, and then it becomes this arms race between the RNC and the DNC, which is, I guess part of the satire of this movie is that they're putting all this money and resources into, a mayoral race of a town of like 20,000 people or something like that. Like they go to the fish fry and polka, and they're at one point, the Steve Carell character, like literally, she's like, okay, I'll make a bet with you. Like whoever wins this race has to eat the other's pussy for an hour. And then Steve Carell's just like, okay, you're on. You're going to be tuck a napkin in because you're going to be eating my pussy tonight. Where he's just like admits that he has a mangina.
Yeah,
it's good stuff. And then they begin showing, like, within the movie, versions of the campaign ads that each of the sides will run, and like the Republican attack ad on the Marine colonel is, again, like it's just totally out of the Bush era, where there's like a wolf stalking through a forest, and they're like, "Who do you want to keep you safe?" Like, vote for strength. And it was just very much of that era. Whereas I feel like if the attack ads were about 2020, the attack ads that they would run on him would be like, don't bother voting for the Marine colonel. He's already been executed secretly. It's only a tulpa that you're seeing on your television and on the ballot booth. Don't bother voting for him. He's already been tried for treason and child pedophilia.
Yeah, he is currently serving in the Magneto prison at the Earth's core. Committee paid for by Majestic 12 for Mayor Fuckler.
And then like the Democratic Party's ads for Chris Cooper's character are like, they do a version of the Eric Greitens ad where he just fires a fucking like 50 cal like technical into like a pond, and then he's just like, not your daddy's Democrat. Except it was the Republican guy who did that. But I see what they were going for. Greitens did the minigun just into like a water trap at a golf course, and was just like,
yeah,
problem Democrats.
Yeah, Greitens was like,
and then of course he did a bunch of
you. Yeah. They were like, Greitens was like, I will be the most Me Too'd governor in the history of
well, I was going to say, and then he won, and then did a whole bunch of rapes, and then had to resign. But oops.
But that's a very good moment to reflect on the film, because what is Stewart's attempt to parody the Greitens video where the guy empties a Gatling gun into a pond? He has him empty a machine gun into a pond. There's no escalation because what are you going to do? It's already at the highest level of absurdity. Like trying to make campaign ads hilariously, absurdly heightened is a fool's errand, because of all the political things, they're the most heightened. They're already there. He shot a gun into a pond, and then you just showed your guy doing it. That's just a reference. That's not a heightening or a joke on it.
Another version of an ad that I think would be like more in tune with the current moment would be if it was like the Republican mayor's wife, who has like a barcode haircut, singing like a very bad version of like My Country 'Tis of Thee over footage of like, I don't know, illegal immigrants jumping over a fence, and then but holding a gun too.
So the problem, what you referred to, that this, like, the palette is already absurd, and so with political ads, at least, you can't make it more absurd, so you're just stuck with like a shitty, like, hey, remember this? The lowest form of humor. Remember this? Remember this? Remember this? It's a problem throughout political comedy, I'd say, for the last like 5 to 10 years, and I call it like the Seth MacFarlaneization of political comedy.
Yeah.
Because everything is just pure reference and like jamming one reference into another. So like if you watch like the Modern Daily Show or anything, it's just like, there's a new Trump thing. Is that like alternative facts? Remember that? It's just all just trying to trick your brain into rewarding itself for making a connection, and there's no actual observation. And I have sympathy for it because it is hard to like.
Exactly.
It's hard. It's already at its most ridiculous. So you have to like work a little harder than maybe you had to a while ago.
Yeah.
But it's also like, well, Trevor Noah makes like $15 million a year. I have very little sympathy.
Yeah, no, that's it. It's a harder job, but these guys aren't up to it, is what it comes down to.
No, yeah. Even if it was easy.
The going got tough, and they said, "Fuck it, I'll just sign a check, or I'll just cash the checks."
Like another really like awkward feature of this movie is that it portrays this small town as sort of fallen on hard times. You know, like the main street, a lot of the storefronts are boarded up, and you know people are looking for answers because they're struggling more and more every day. But the movie's reason for that is that it's set up as like it's never spoken at in terms of like the offshoring of manufacturing or deindustrialization. It's because the Marine base in the town closed down.
Yeah.
So it's just like the problem is we're not spending enough on the military to support small town America, apparently.
Yeah. Where's that military Keynesianism? Bring it back.
You're making a movie about rural and specifically like Rust Belt decline and never mentioning NAFTA.
Yeah. Not for a second.
What the
no.
fuck, brother?
Industrialization has nothing to do with it. It's just some DC idiot drew a line in a expense report and cut out the funds for our base, and now we're all poor.
That's the thing. Those were the jobs that paid really well in the Rust Belt. The military, being an enlisted man in the military, not fucking manufacturing back when wages kind of kept in pace with the CPI. No, it's the fucking military. You cash out there.
Yeah, it's like but all of the car dealerships that sold pickups at wildly inflated interest rates, they're all gone now. Wildly inflated interest rates to the PFCs, I should say.
And I think it's a marker of just like not just sort of like the liberal sensibility of the film, but like the overall just like liberal conception of politics now. I see this from the Pod Save America guys all the time when they're talking about, for instance, like Bowman defeating Elliot Engel, and they're just like, yeah, I mean, like the message here is that like Democrats got to find like young, cool candidates who tell an interesting story. Like that's what voters are looking for now. And like everything is just like all political conflict is completely denuded of politics.
Yeah.
And everything is a contest between competing sort of stories and personalities and like these cultural signifiers, once again, that the movie is making so much hay out of. Going on, it's at one point, so like the more money that goes in, like Carell's character is just like, okay, we can't bootstrap it anymore. We got to up our fundraising game. So he brings Chris Cooper with him. They charter a $50K private jet to like fly him to my parents' apartment on the Upper West Side to go to like a fundraising thing, and it's all like, oh, it's the small town farmer guys in a room with all these like wacky rich people on the Upper West Side. And everyone's trying to wine and dine him and shit like that, and they so like they give him like there's a moment where he gets to like sort of address all of these people with and their checkbooks, and instead of detonating a suicide vest, which would be the preferable outcome in a situation like that, he sort of starts off talking about like God, there's something about this. It's just kind of strange to me that I gotta to help my town. I got to go to your town and get money from you, but like I'm not working, for my town. And it's just all just like, and then he sort of like implies that like he's asked what the biggest problem in politics is, and he implies in a very sort of soft way that the problem is the money of all the people in the room that he's talking to, and he sort of like spits some real talk, and then on the flight back to Wisconsin, Steve Carell is like blown away. He's like, I can't believe how good you did. You completely destroyed it. We could ask for any amount of money from them because you domed them. You shame them in a way that they love. It's our money that's the problem. That's genius. Like I couldn't think of a political slogan that good. What an angle that you're playing here. And okay, so with their new donor money, Steve Carell is able to hire forecaster Enton to run like the data operation, and then there's like these two characters played by Topher Grace and Natasha Lyonne who come in and give sort of a I don't know, a crash course on polling versus market research. And like, Topher Grace is like the Nate Silver, just the numbers guy. I have the model. And Natasha Lyonne is just like like people lie to polls, but they tell the truth on the computer in terms of what they buy and like the metadata. Like you need to look at people's behavior outside of what they'll tell you in a poll. And like, this is how, with these two people, like this is how we get the real truth of like micro-targeting voters and shit like that. And then, of course, like the Republican side with Rose Byrne, they bring on their big donors too. In like two guys, you don't get to see much of it, but there's just two guys in wheelchairs that it's like very heavily implied are the Koch brothers. Yeah. And then in the film's one funny scene in this movie.
This is a great scene, actually.
That is actually
it does seem like
funny.
It's imported from a different film.
It seems like it's a moment that seems beamed in from a completely different movie, where Carell brings in the Democrat big money billionaire donor, and it's played by the great Bill Irwin. He's like a sort of a hybrid of Sheldon Adelson and Elon Musk. Yeah. Who has suffered some series of mini strokes and now walks around in sort of like a mech skeleton that moves his limbs for him. He has an exoskeleton and like a Stephen Hawking style voice box, but then it doesn't work and it's like jerking him all around, and he's like, and then all he wants is just for them to support Israel, which is like that was the only moment of like. And he
asked what his opinion on like the occupation of a specific settlement in the West Bank through a robot voice that sounds like a see and spell.
And that was like, it's so conceptually great and well executed that I don't know how it made it in the movie.
The way I think about it is I think what Stewart's thought was like, all right, I'm at this level, right? Like my satire is at this level. I'm trying to keep it realistic. And then he probably thought of that scene as like a little color, like a little bit of exaggeration to make the rest of it pop. But it speaks to the degree to which he's out of touch that to make a movie about politics in 2020, to have any kind of bite or humor to it, that level, the level of that scene, has to be the baseline that you operate off of.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If the movie had a mediocre plot but was operating at that baseline for 2 hours, we would have really liked it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, because that was the only scene that captures the level of absurdity and grotesquerie that is commensurate with the moment that we're living in.
Like so much of the rest of the comedy is all that, like, oh, look at the rubes and look at this fancy guy. He thinks these guys are rubes, but actually they're sophisticated. Or oh, look at this banter between the Republican and the Democratic fixer. And oh, look at all the references they're making to politics. Oh, hilarious. No, mech suit Sheldon Adelson.
Yeah. We were just that scene with Bill Irwin though did provoke gales of laughter from us.
Yeah,
so that was quite well done.
Surprised as hell.
Yeah. All right. So like it goes on, and then like there's the daughter begins to be a little bit more earnest with Steve Carell, and they have a little bit of a fight, and then the daughter reveals to him that the guys at the Hofbrau have only been just simply like playing along with him, sort of flattering him in a weird way. She's like, look, it's a Hofbrau place. They don't have Budweiser and hamburgers. They have German beer and German food. And like you came in there trying to like pretend to affect some normal guy thing, and like you don't even understand what our local customs or concerns are, which begs the question, like, why wouldn't they just say, hey, we don't have
exactly
Budweiser
like,
here?
Look at you, fancy lady, you came in here and you misunderstood it. And it's like, what did they do? They secretly like planned in 5 minutes to acquire a burger from another place and a beer from somewhere else just to fuck with him? Especially since at that point he just comes into the bar. It's like, I'm sorry, that is way more psychotic than assuming that they'd have a burger at a bar.
Okay, this is where the movie fucks up in its categorization of Great Lakes people. Minnesotans would think this is like, because Minnesotans are passive-aggressive psychopaths. Yeah, they would think this is like the greatest victory ever scored over someone. Like, enjoy your hamburger.
I do agree with Felix. If that were to happen in a state, Minnesota would be the state.
No, yeah, they're the most repressed people on earth, and to them that is just like a coup to perform that on someone. But Wisconsin, they would just like exhale like Jabba the Hutt and be like, We have sausage. We got sausage and more sausage.
We have knockwurst, bratwurst, fatwurst, burgwurst.
We got liverwurst on Friday, and then he would just trail off for approximately 9 years.
That's correct. That's all right.
Yeah, the Minnesotan would just he would jack off to serving the guy the spite hamburger.
He'd be driving 20 miles to the nearest gastropub that has hamburgers, just chuckling the entire time.
Yeah, he would just be in his car like fucking idiot, a hamburger, just like to the next. He's going from Eden Prairie to Edina, picking up a hamburger. You're gonna eat the fucking hamburger because they every Minnesotan. They fit like the psychological profile of a serial killer because they were embarrassed in Miss Gunnarson's class in fucking 3rd grade, and it just made them the most repressed psychopaths ever. But they pride themselves on being nice. Wisconsinites Minnesota's a way better place to live. Wisconsinites though, I appreciate they're about what they're about openly.
Oh, absolutely. It's because they're too drunk. They're too there's no way that they would be able to hold that plan together long enough. Due to being shit-faced.
Minnesotans, Minnesota shit is you have a dark family secret and you can only communicate it over words with friends.
That's it. That's correct.
All right, so the mayor's race is now seeing, in this small town, is now seeing a huge influx of super PAC money. And there's quite a bit of comedy wrung out of the Chris Cooper's character campaign. Carell creates all these super PACs for them that are working out of the same office but can't talk to each other because there can't be any official, of course, coordination between the super PAC and the campaign, even though they're literally sitting at the same table, and there's some funny hijinks there. But so essentially what happens is as it gets closer to election day, forecaster Enton has given him the math. He's given him the raw shit. And Carell comes to the realization of look, we can't win this election. There's just not enough people. We need more Latinos or blah blah blah. We just can't get enough people to vote for you. So we got to go negative. We got to stop people from voting for the other guy. And then there's this question of it turns out that the Republican mayor used his authority to intervene in the case of his brother, who was an oxy addict, and after he was arrested, he pulled some strings to get him into rehab instead of prison. And, there's this whole thing between Chris Cooper and his daughter and Carell where they're hey, I thought we were the good guys. We're supposed to, when they go low, we're supposed to go high or whatever. And they don't want to play dirty pool. And Steve Carell's look, elections are just math. It's just numbers. And if you want to win, this is what you got to do to win. And he's flummoxed by this. But then he gets this other bit of, so here's where the twist is revealed in the movie. Where while there's this conflict over are we going to go dirty or not, the daughter goes on her own into the house of the Republican mayor, and you're what? Why are they sort of collaborating? And as they're talking, you become aware that this whole election is Chris Cooper and the Republican mayor. All sides are actually working together to do this kayfabe contest between the two of them to just finesse, fleece the DNC and RNC and their super PACs of money that they're giving to these campaigns, right? So that's the reveal. And the Republican mayor character is look, forget the thing with my brother. What we'll do is we'll give them something even better than that. And they concoct a fake story about how he has a bastard daughter that Steve Carell sort of foolishly releases on election day, and then it's sort of debunked in real time that actually it's his niece, and it blows up in his face, and they go to the polls and it's razor tight, and then in the most bizarre scene in the movie that again is another clue that this was written in 2007 is there's this one scene on election day where they just plug in shots of Antifa and tiki torch wearing alt-right guys
and
turning out on election day.
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives
people.
Matter. So it's just no dialogue, no gag set up. It's just they just show you these groups of people where they're just to remind you, it's 2020. The year is 2020 now. I remember these things from the very recent past.
Yeah,
so,
all those people would be on a road tripping to rural Wisconsin because of a viral video from 3 weeks ago or a month ago or whatever the fuck it is. Absolutely.
eventually what happens is Steve Carell, in like a Kaiser Soze bulletin board moment, realizes that his underling from the very beginning of the movie that showed him the viral video that began this odyssey and like this whole election contest between the two national parties was from this small town in Wisconsin, and that he knew the people that Carell had been interacting with on the campaign. And he's like, what? And then, Kaiser Sose, like dropping the Kobayashi porcelain mug, he realizes that the viral video itself was staged. The whole thing was a con. Everyone in the town was in on it the whole time. They were all acting. They were all playing parts. And then, when the results are coming in, they're like, it's too close to call. The election's actually a tie. It comes down to one vote. And then Carell busts in, and he's like, no, like this whole thing's a fraud. And then you realize it was Chris Cooper's daughter was the mastermind of this whole plan, which barely makes sense at all. It's like the whole plan along was like, look, we're a suffering small town. Our town is dying. Otherwise, nobody would the national media or no one else or any of the big money donors. No one would have paid any attention to our town absent this stunt that we pulled off, this con we ran on the media and political consultants. And because they formed all these super PACs that funneled $45 million into each, combined into these races, they're like, guess what? According to campaign finance law, that money doesn't need to be accounted for. So, presumably, they're just going to take $45 million and spend it on whatever they want to do to fill in potholes and, build a hospital in this town, which I don't think really makes sense. I don't think that's legal.
It doesn't. Well, I mean, beyond legal,
the
vast majority of money that any of the campaigns or super PACs spend is on salaries for guys like Steve Carell. And they don't, and they're not waiting for a check.
The money's not
they're
fungible.
Paid, they're paid to be there. They're already getting the dispersals, all those, when they show the big war room and all the people in there, and Topher Grace, the forecaster Renton, and Natasha Lyonne, the hilariously Jewish market research lady. Those people all already got paid. So unless they're breaking into their bank accounts, there's nowhere for them to rake the money off of. The money all goes to the fucking the DC scumlord class. That's who gets paid for these.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's we're gonna do this insanely convoluted stunt so that the Holiday Inn by the highway is full for a month, and the diner gets record business for the weekend.
Yeah. There's the money that doesn't go to paying for the salary pays for ads and media buys.
Yeah, so the local radio station, probably the Madison stations for radio and television, presumably, depending on where. They don't really say where this, but wherever the nearest metro area is that they're in the zone of, those are the guys who got all the money in the local area. And the thing is, you said, if this was a trick to get the national media to pay attention so that they could set them straight, that would be cheesy, but at least it would be plausible. But he has to go to this goofy con thing because he doesn't have, I don't think, the conviction behind any actual prescription to give anybody a big speech about what middle America needs. Instead, it's if they just had the money from these rich guys to build a hospital, then for the town of 5,000 people, then the economy would get fixed.
I mean, this is why, if we take this con seriously as representing a point of view of the actual point of view of the filmmakers, it's, in a vacuum, not that bad, because I think what the film is saying is that, all of the slogans and policies and wonkery and data and media hits that both of these political parties fight each other with for the votes of these small town people and in Rust Belt dying communities and all pockmarked across this great land of ours, that essentially at the end of the day, all their problems, it's not complicated. What they need is just a direct transfer of cash from wealthy people directly to them so that they can, invest in their own infrastructure and community in a way that will be sustainable or provide jobs or whatever. But I mean, it's so bird brain because essentially it's liberal mindset where it's just basically the point of the movie is we need to get big money out of politics.
Yeah, that's the main problem. And most of the prescription about the political culture isn't that it's so much that everyone is venal and greedy and a piece of shit and that has no actual interest in improving anyone's lives. It's like, it's too partisan.
Yeah.
Which was sort of the hallmark of the Jon Stewart viewpoint. And it's like, I don't give a shit. Like, whatever. If something's funny, I generally don't really care if it's like Armando Iannucci, famous lib. Famous.
Yeah.
Like, I had to unfollow him on Twitter, but has written some of the greatest political satire of all time. So whatever. To this day, still writes it. Death of Stalin was hysterical. But this falls short in that avenue. None of the political satire is good. All the political satire, it's not so much about how shitty the consultant characters are and how awful they are. It's that they have these sort of cultural foibles, but like it's the same American comedy problem that you can't ever have a character that's nakedly detestable and irredeemable, even if they are your main character. It's a problem. It's a thing that's why Danny McBride's the master. When Danny McBride writes satires, he starts out with the baseline that everyone is disgusting.
Yes.
Yeah, and that
whereas Jon Stewart really does think
it was just
everybody is basically everyone is essentially has good intentions, and the thing that stops us from exercising our good intentions is the damn super PACs with their damn hysterically flattening ads making us hate each other.
Yeah, and it's just like all of the jokes are like the targets of its satire, like, and it does skewer the Rose Byrne and Steve Carell characters as being sort of like, selfish, narcissistic, disconnected from anything real in Americans' lives or politics. But it's not nearly mean enough. In fact, it's not mean at all. And it's just like, it's hard to gauge the level of disgust that Jon Stewart actually has for particularly the Steve Carell character. And like, he makes fun of him, but like ultimately he's not like a bad guy. But the real life version of Gary Zimmer is like a demon. Like an absolute monster. Like nothing, absolutely nothing redeemable about him whatsoever.
Sociopath. Because that's the people who are selected by that system. To get to that point, you either have had all humanity drained out of you and become a fucking Gnostic archon of evil, or you never had it to begin with, Kumar. One or the other.
And and also like at the end of the movie, of course, like when the jig is up and all is revealed, there's a sort of like a scene of all the townspeople talking to each other about like, oh my God, I never thought we'd get away with it. I was so nervous, but also offering like, quite nuanced and sophisticated political takes for like, oh, actually they are very well informed. And like Will Sasso and the other guy are just like, hey, it's like I always said, is when the news becomes entertainment, like that's when we're all really, screwed then, and like they'll have these like nuanced, smart political takes or whatever. But ultimately, like the town, there is no conflict between like the Republicans or the Democrats or even a right and
there's
a left.
There's no conflict at all.
There's no conflict at all. Like there's no real political issues that are being debated or fought over. And like the townspeople don't really have any beliefs or commitments outside of a kind of a gentle humanism. That's lacking in big city America.
Like, you don't need to make them into hooting chuds. That would be flattening too, but they don't have any political views. And that's because he's not comfortable with that. He's not comfortable with ideology. I mean, he looks back. He has apparently said, "Oh yeah, I kind of embarrassed about the march on the March for Sanity or whatever the fuck it was." But this proves that he hasn't learned anything, because at the end of the day, his whole like I am a comedian dodge was premised on the fact that he does not have confident political beliefs. He is fully a liberal in the sense that he has a liberal's faith in the American political system, and because the American political system is so grotesquely unmatched to the basic well-being of its citizens, that conflict has to be confronted at some point for you to get anywhere meaningful in your like an analysis, and he just can't make the push. And so he punts. He will always end up punting on actual questions of ideology.
And I do agree with that. Like, I'm a comedian dodge. I do agree with Stewart's, even if like people think it's a dodge, and in some ways it could be. I agree with that. Like the general message. Like we put too much stock in our culture. But yeah, like even if you are a lib, like Iannucci isn't totally afraid to say what he believes, and that's the difference.
Yeah.
That is the key difference.
He's also not afraid to be like absolutely like nauseatingly scathing about the people he's portraying. Like they're and like so it really lands and hits. And like speaking more broadly, it like this as in terms of this movie revealing the limits of this kind of liberal lib mindset is that, like, on their own, getting money out of politics and doing away with super PACs, that's a good thing. Public financing of elections, getting rid of advertising on TV, getting rid of like just brain dead, stupid cable news commentary and sort of partisan bickering, whatever. In and of themselves, those are fine. These things are making our country stupider and more corrupt. But like, you could fix all of those things. But like, if people still don't have money at the end of the month, it's like the material reality is, in like the viciousness of this country is not really going to change.
Yeah.
It's like it'll make our elections a little bit more fair. Yeah. But like, but ultimately, like it's without anything underneath it, it's very hollow.
Without people being able to actually exercise democratic influence through coordinated activity beyond the very unorganized and frankly shitty end state of voting, where it's almost impossible to coordinate action at all to get meaningful influence. You need things like, I don't know, a labor movement to do that. And what is the big, like, there is actually, in the bare schema of this movie, there is a decent policy proposal, which is, I mean, the happy ending here is that the town got a bunch of rich people to give them money without them knowing it, and they used it to build a hospital. The implication there being, if we just invested a lot of these rich people's ill-gotten gains that they used to fuck around in the political system in the population, you actually could change things. But the mechanism for doing that, I would say, that he proposes is a little out of touch, to put it mildly.
Okay, so we need to talk about the very last shot of this movie, because that for me is what transformed this.
I stood up and just cheered.
From being a somewhat embarrassing whiff to something that was like felt like a knife being turned in my stomach. So like they do this little like flash forward where you see the town is building a hospital with the super PAC money, and that like the tide election, they just decided that the daughter would be the mayor of the town.
No, they do it because that was a fake election. Nobody voted except for the two candidates, and they voted for each other, I think. And then they had another election, and the daughter won.
Oh, right. Yeah, the townspeople didn't actually vote. They made it tied. And so they do a special election, and the daughter becomes mayor of the town. That's great. And then it's sort of like, there's like the credits roll, and it's like you see a scene of Steve Carell like coming back to live in the town, and oh my God, like he's in a relationship with the daughter now, and they're together. And I was like, oh, that's a little weird. He's like, 30 years older than her. But then like that cuts away, and it's a fantasy, and it's Steve Carell in bed eating the delicious strudel pastry with lots of gluten and absolutely no soy, with like the bakery woman who has a crush on him.
Yeah.
But that's also a fantasy. And then it turns out that Steve Carell and Rose Byrne just get back together, and they live together and have like a James Carville, Mary Matlin style relationship, which is, fairly realistic, and also points to this idea that, at that level of political consulting and machination, like there's no difference between them. No. They believe in all the same things. It's all just fucking kayfabe. It's what they do what they get paid for. Like the idea that James Carville or Mary Matlin haven't fucking just put a pillow over the other person's head one night just shows how little they care about the politics that they supposedly battle over every day. You would put a fucking 22 in the other person's head if you gave any shit whatsoever about the things you profess to care about. So that's kind of realistic. But then the last shot of the movie, and they do these little like, Animal House style, where are they now? Like, they built the hospital. They live together and now shout at each other on CNN. And then the last shot of the movie is just money rolling off the printing press at like the U.S. Treasury, and then it just says, "But money lived happily ever after," and then it gives the title of the movie "Irresistible," but "resist" in the middle of the word is highlighted in red, and then it's like the end. And that's how I was really, my tummy hurt so bad looking at that.
I was
it gave me such a bad tummy ache. It really felt bad.
I was begging for the subtlety of Bulworth after that.
I love that moment.
Bulworth holds up, actually. Like, I mean, if people could say it's like canceled now, but yeah, I don't know. Let's rewatch it to find out.
Okay.
Maybe we should rewatch
Bulworth. Bulworth is like, its politics are very good, but it's like, you cannot ignore that the central conceit is like, what if a senator started rapping?
It's amazing. I think we should rewatch it at some point.
We should.
I'll watch it with you guys. Yeah. I will watch it with you guys.
Okay, I will say, I actually really love that scene, and it got me to stand up and cheer literally in the room, because up until that point, the entire experience of watching the movie was very disorienting to me because it was very clear that Jon Stewart throughout the entire thing is trying to operate, at least he thinks he's trying to operate on a bunch of different levels, right? Because the entire time that there was all the cringy shit about Carell patronizing these Midwestern rubes, I was just like, I think that this is all going to be a joke on Carell, and then found out, aha, it is. And then you see out, and then there's the triple fake out ending. It's like, okay, he's trying to, but then ending at that moment, just everything snapped into place. And like his level of recursive like irony and the limit of it, like where he hit the brick wall, just became totally clear. And I was like, okay, now I know what movie I'm watching.
Well,
Money lived happily ever after.
Yes, there you go. And now I guess like yes, that is irresistible. It is, yeah. You can't say no to watching this movie.
You cannot do it. It's government mandated. It will be after Biden's president.